maybe now it'll say I'm live. Holy moly. Maybe I wasn't live before. Uh, Fuck, I hate YouTube. Yeah, I'm sort of trapped doing some work, and I thought, why not do some live streaming? Just because. And maybe there'll be someone there who wants to chat with me while I do this uh, real mindless work that I'm involved with at the moment, and maybe help explain why I'm so obsessed with true crime at the moment. This genre of I mean, it's not quite fiction, and it's not quite. I guess it isn't fiction. But it's a very almost like a fictional narrative, and that maybe answers my question: why people are excited about true crime. It's because it's it's like a more real kind of titillation, perhaps. But I've been watching a lot of it. I've been watching so much lately. I've been listening to some of the podcasts, and I've been reading some books. I read a book about the Columbine massacre, and it was quite interesting. It's a book by this guy called, I think his name's Dave Cullen, and it's supposed to be the definitive recount of the Columbine massacre, or narrative of the Columbine massacre, taking in all these different approaches. But then you get into you go online, you find these forums, and there's whole forums just devoted to the Columbine massacre. And there are these people there who call this author a liar. And so I read another book, which actually had a lot more detail, to be quite honest. And now you can ask me anything about the Columbine massacre. I know more than I really wanted to know, to be honest. But it's fascinating that there's these people out there, and they call themselves researchers, as if they have some sort of detached academic interest in in crime, criminal investigations, when actually they just want to squeeze every last detail, every last salacious detail out of a crime scene. So yeah, I had this. So what was really interesting about Columbine for me, or reading about Columbine, was partly because I'd never really heard of it when it happened. Like I wasn't. I was. I don't. I think I actually did. I think it was during, but not very scant. It wasn't a big media event in the country I live in, obviously, because it's more of an American story, obviously. But it's why it's such an important, I guess, cultural, historical event in the United States is because it just came at the birth of the internet, and was like a mass media event. It came between not Waco, between Oklahoma bombing and September 11th. And so it was almost like an act of domestic terror, and obviously it was like the first of the, I guess, modern school shooters. Like, if you're a school shooter, everything you do now is derivative of the Columbine boys. I don't want to say derivative; that makes it sound like they're artists, but in a sense, they kind of are. I mean, and maybe if I wanted to make a sort of a thesis about it, I'd say that Columbine is pure American entertainment, and obviously I've got to qualify that a lot, but it's you read all the details, and and you actually realize just how fascinating it is about how you have these two. So often you have two participants who radicalized each other, and were trying to emulate a kind of a white nationalist. Well, like they were trying to emulate Timothy McVeigh. And Columbine, I did something I didn't realize it wasn't a. I mean, the school shooting part of it was obviously what got everyone, where they murdered everyone, but they failed in their primary objective, which was to blow up the school. They assembled some improvised explosive devices, and they were hoping that they would go, like, that one floor of the school was going to collapse onto the other. And people think if it had happened, hundreds of people would have died, and it would have been a lot more of an atrocity than it was. And the other thing I learned about it was that they weren't they weren't the two Columbine boys. They weren't the way that they've been portrayed as are as sort of social outcasts, when actually they were highly socialized. They had jobs, they participated in out of class activities and had a circle of friends, went to the prom, dated girls. They weren't like some kind of people like to put some try to create a narrative over things they can understand, and it appears that it wasn't simply that these kids were bullied, so they killed the bullies or something. If anything, they were the bullies. And it's fascinating that they have fan clubs online. There are all these, I think they're teenage girls or something, who buy into them as some sort of tragic heroes. Like I think maybe they kind of see them as some sort of authentically kind of angsty people, like, you know, sort of James Dean, like the way we used to look at James Dean or something. They look at them because a lot of these kids were born like much after the Columbine massacre happened. It makes me feel old. But you see all these, like, they have fan art. It's insane, and they're obviously inspired many school shooters. And you go onto these forums. There's forums. There's one particular forum which had like 3 mass shooters who have been members of this online forum. It's rather mental if you think about it. Hello, Redeem 10. I'm glad someone's here. Hey, dude. Yeah. So and I'm sure, like, I think most of my viewers are American. So if you have any particular input on this, I'd really be keen to hear it, because why true crime? Why are we attracted to true crime? Because everyone seems to be really attracted to it as a genre. My mum listens to it. I listen to it. And also, why was Columbine so important? I feel important, for want of a better term, for American culture. Another thing I learned was that most of the people they shot were at close range, hiding under desks. It's really fucking grim. When you actually read the details, it's really grim, and it's quite and they weren't like, if you look at all the school shooters, or look at school shooters now, they all seem to be with these like military style semi-automatic rifles, like the AR-15, which can just slice a person in two almost. But the Columbine kids were using these kind of really sort of old, very very hard to target sort of 30-year-old shotguns and 9mm firearms. And so they were, and they obviously, if you look at the footage of them shooting, they weren't really exactly what you would call marksmen. So it's actually quite, it stands to reason. I mean, it was the highest body count in at the time, but it sort of also stands to reason it wasn't as big as it could have been, because they weren't as ruthlessly efficient as their people who they inspired, like that guy in Parkland who just annihilated this whole school, or a whole class full of kids and stuff. Such a grim subject topic, but aside, why are we? I'm just trying to. There's a book I've got on my pile about. It's called Towards a Theory of True Crime, and I think academics are trying to explain true crime, and there hasn't quite yet been a cohesive sort of explanation or way or approach of looking at true crime because it's not quite a genre. It's not quite a literary genre. But the way I'm talking about it now, I'm talking about it like it's a story involving these two guys, and that's kind of makes it that way. It's almost like a choose your own adventure sort of thing, where everyone gets to be a detective and scour it and stuff. Oh, hi in Germany. You must probably just be waking up. Shooting really are approached like specific murder. Yeah. Yeah, like, do you mean like murders when true crime happens, murders are sort of the ones about crazy shit happening with occult rituals and stuff like that. Shootings seem pretty straightforward compared to the kind of crimes that people want to hear about in the news. They want to hear about disappearances and all of that kind of stuff, don't they? I know that, like, and we have some really big. We've got some big crimes, big, like, I guess you'd call them blockbuster. See, it's hard talking about them in any like the way when you start talking about them and speculating about them, it instantly becomes really exploitative and garish because you're talking. There are real victims involved, that kind of thing. So it's quite, So when I talk about there was this really famous when I say blockbuster, I'm actually probably I'm really not being very good for the victims of these things. But there are some really big ones that have happened in New Zealand. There's one I remember when I was growing up. There were these two Swedish tourists who got buried on a mountain somewhere, and that was probably big news in Sweden and nowhere else in the world, I mean, other than New Zealand. The guy who's in prison, I think he's still in prison for it. His brother became a really famous politician. He's still quite famous now, I think. Although he didn't get into Parliament in the last election. Although despite being the leader of the party, his party did. And what else? There was this other one, which was this guy who he was like he killed his wife and daughter. So always these like really grim family annihilators, eh? This guy, he killed his wife and daughter, and his alibi was that he was in Wellington visiting a sex worker, and the jury showed that he could have driven up to his part of the island and back, in the amount of time that he claimed he was down here for, and people call it the Lundy. His name's called Lundy, and they call it the Lundy 500 when you go this length of the island in a very short amount of time, and I think it's under an hour to get from A to B. They call from Wellington to Palmerston North. They call it the Lundy 500 because if you can do it in that time, then you can kill someone. It's so grim. That's interesting. Do people in Germany still talk about the RAF? Like, is that still like a hot button thing? Because that's the last time they would have been active would have been like 30 years ago or something. Hey, like, or even longer. I kind of. They were really interesting because I read about them, and funnily enough, there was a book about it that they gave me to read when I was in high school. So this is on the syllabus for some reason. I think my history teacher was really, really into this kind of. Oh man, we had some crazy, just some really, I don't know whether you'd call them eccentric teachers in my school, but yeah, I learnt a lot about RAF and how they the leaders hanging themselves and all sorts. They believed in what they were doing, but they were also a bit less. They weren't like that fanatical. Is that my understanding of it? They believed in the struggle. Yeah, films. I've seen the is it the big one? And it treats it almost like some kind of romance or something. But they seem to be more enterprise. They seem to be the sort of people who would, if they weren't doing that, they'd become liberal kind of politicians or something. They don't have. There's no real. They don't seem to have the courage. I mean, it's wrong to say they don't have the courage of their convictions. They still did a lot of like. Yeah, that's the one, the Baader-Meinhof complex. That was, and I was quite disappointed with that film. I didn't think it was. It got a lot. It came out of a lot of fanfare, and it didn't seem to have a lot of. It didn't seem to have not much going on, and other than to learn that there were these middle class Germans who were fighting against the man in the 1970s and early 80s, if that was the time. It's an interesting thing because I guess at that time a lot of Nazis were probably still running Germany. So if you think about the 40s, so you go 50s, 60s, 70s, 30, 40 years, you still have people like maybe some of the judiciary, some politicians who were still Nazified, I guess, and so there might have been a lot to fight for because it's not like you can. I know they did. I know that there was that whole denazification, but you have a whole country to sort through. There's going to be plenty of Nazis to go around still at the end of the day. So I get why they would be doing what they were doing, but it's sort of I don't know if I'm sort of like terrorism is like I'm going to start talking about terrorism on a live stream. I'm on thin ice, but yeah, I kind of I like there's violent struggles and then there's violent struggles, and I'm sort of don't understand what they were trying to do, other than just do some sort of existential. I guess there was also this thing that in the 1970s, terrorism was a bit more of a naive kind of a time. Do you know, like people would get on a plane and hijack it and try to get to Cuba or something, and that seems really quite sweet now. Like it doesn't seem like it doesn't seem that hardcore. Like now it'll be like they would they'd blow a person up, they'd decapitate someone on live television to prove a point. So yeah. I can watch my analytics go down as soon as I start talking about decapitating people. So maybe I should start working on actually doing some work, a little bit of work here. But yeah, the Baader Meinhof complex. I don't think I think in New Zealand we had some we had these terror raids about a decade ago, and they were actually our intelligence services in cahoots with the police. They arrested a bunch of people for basically just hanging out in the woods, and it was these terror raids. It was just this really bad investigation, and they weren't doing anything. So it was quite a botched kind of a thing. But that's as close as we've had in recent memory. Oh, obviously, not including the most recent attack, the big one. Which kind of feels like an anomaly because he wasn't exactly a homegrown extremist, But no, I can't think about what we've had. I'm sure there must be like, well, we've had hate groups. We've had a bunch of them. Obviously, there was this one called the Fourth Reich, and they're obviously coming out of Christchurch, because that's where these hoodlums seem. This is a good shot. That's where some of these hoodlums seem to all come from. But yeah, So it was still very conservative and right wing. Yeah, so Germany is quite interesting because I have some German friends and they consider themselves left wing, but I would consider them more like Blairite in terms of their politics, and I guess that's probably kind of where the Social Democrats are in Germany, but also the Christian, is it the one who Angela Merkel, she isn't what British people would recognise as conservative either, so. It's the German model seems just a bit slightly different to comprehend. I guess that's a good one. It's a shame about the okay, I'll do this one. Yeah, maybe I'll do. Nah, it sucks. So just so you know what I'm doing, I spent all day. Myself and the person, my business partner, we basically spent all day just dropping cans of seltzer into water, and we're trying to get a good shot of. Actually, I'm going to start from scratch, which I'm going to hopefully use for an advertising, for some advertising, and that will so something like this. This is what I've been working on. So it's like it's called Friends of the Sun, and it's a kind of a, and we've put some yellow light, and I'm not sure if this, it's not quite working. You can see how I've simulated some slow motion there, and it's warped. There's all this horrible gunky warping, so I can't. It's not acceptable. That's not commercially. None of what you're seeing here is commercially acceptable. Like I can't. It's unusable. So either I fill up, either I do a whole nother day's worth of shooting, or I try and salvage some of this footage. It's quite frustrating, really, but it's just what I do. Keeps me going. So what I'm doing here, what I've got here is I've got some of this footage I've taken, and it was shot at, I think this was 120 frames per second, and it catches it quite, it caught it, but then I have to slow it down even further because this can drops really quickly, and so we've got the software that can simulate slow motion, and it's quite involved. Obviously, you can't make up, and when you create a whole new frame, you've got to make up information in that frame. So it takes a lot of work to sort of pick through what's actually on the frame. This isn't a very complicated shot, so I'm hoping we can simulate it. However, the water is quite complicated. So you'll see that the can, that's nice and smoothly slow motion, but the water just looks like trash. So yeah, that's my life. Fuck my life, yo. Christian Democratic Union. Yeah. So what are that? Yeah. Where a number of the Japanese Red Army basically turned on each other while isolated in the woods. Jesus, that sounds mental. Was that like in the war, or was that like in recent time? Because that's like sounds like that's pretty. They must have had a fight, and they decided to. They've moved to the centre over the past 20 years, and the Greens are filling the void. And there's also a party called the Left. That's like a nice generic socialist name, the Left. 70s. I'm going to look that up because that's pretty mental. That's like some. Well, it's definitely worth reading about that. I mean, in the 70s in Japan, they also had their own. That was when Mishima famously killed himself on the balcony of the Japanese Ministry of Defense, and he was obviously Japan's most celebrated playwright and poet at the time, and funnily enough, also PewDiePie's famous favorite author, coincidentally, a hard right fascist. Read into that what you will, and he was trying to he had all this romantic ideas about a rebirth of sorts of samurai culture, and obviously I guess that plays into a lot of far right imperialist Japanese sentiment. The kind of, you would imagine that these if you think that the sort of assholes in the West who kind of like to mythologize the past, then you can only imagine what some of these far right Japanese people are like. They collect samurai swords and all that kind of malarkey. In fact, there's this video doing the rounds right now where there's this guy praising Donald Trump, and he's pretending to be a samurai, and all of that. Well, it's quite like we in the West, we love samurai, and we think that it's the bee's knees, and it's Japanese culture, and it's really cool because it's like they're much cooler than like knights, like, well, no, not cooler, but they're it's relatively recent. But within Japan itself, there's a lot of politics involved, right? So that lends itself to a lot of far right Japanese politics. And so Yukio Mishima, was it Yukio? Is his name Yukio Mishima? And he's an interesting guy because he was a repressed gay guy, and he was as well as being a hyper traditionalist. Yes, so yeah, okay, I'm gonna look that up. The Asama Sanso incident. So Mishima, who's a celebrated playwright, Japanese playwright, he, as an act of protest, he has this little cult as well. So he has this little samurai club of young men. So so it just the stuff writes itself. These far right guys, they're always you know they're really homophobic, but for some reason they really love that young cock. So they he's got this little cult of young men who like to dress up in all this kind of paramilitary gear, and I think so. It was 1975. He 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 I think he they break into the in Tokyo. They break into the Ministry of the military Department of Military or Department of Military Affairs, and they take the minister hostage, and then it culminates in him making a declaration from the balcony, and then going inside and doing whatever. I don't know what I forgot the name of it is, where you slice your innards open and have one of your people cut your head off. Really grim shit. And I'm sure now they would live stream it, which is thankfully we didn't have live streaming in 1975. And he sort of became this famous incident because it's this like really mental shit that's the one, seppuku. This famous incident that the Japanese that Mishima did. And so he's a fascinating character, mostly because of that, but also because he has this really interesting literary legacy, and his life is quite interesting too. But yeah, but but it's interesting to learn when you find out he's relatively he might be quite obscure in the West, I would imagine. But it's interesting to find out that PewDiePie is a fan. You kind of think to yourself, why is PewDiePie, who's quite sort of who gets a lot of people hating on him because they perceive him to be like a Nazi, whether that's true or not. And yet, it just seems really coincidental that his favourite artist just happens to be this Japanese far right guy who thinks that Japan should have won the war. Do you know? How does that work? Do you know? And of course, it's just, it obviously buys into a lot of European far right people. They love Asian culture too, or they love they have a perception of Asian culture, I would imagine. Hitler was a God. These live streams always end up with me talking about Hitler, don't they? This is not got it. This can't happen for much longer. But yeah. Rain of Light, which I know of a French documentary I had. That's okay. So I'm going to have to look. This is great that you guys are on chat telling me about this, because I'm going to look all this up. This is part of my binge at the moment. I also read a book. Well, I guess while we've honed in on Japan, I read a book about the this cult that who nerve gassed the the Tokyo subway, and they were. I mean, that guy was actually only just executed 2 years ago, or not 2019 even, and. Like Japan, obviously they executed him and it made news, but Japan doesn't like to make, they're one of the last states in the world that still, I mean, quite a few of them still have capital punishment, but I think Japan is one of the ones which does it and just like doesn't really want, it's one of these things that they'd rather not publicize, as opposed to, Saudi Arabia or Iran, or who do it publicly, or America, I guess America had, because they are a lot more of an open country and, you can't avoid it. But they executed this guy, and his beliefs and his cult are just insane. They used to give electroshock therapy or electroshock people to like, it was a cult that gave electroshock treatment to its members. I mean, even Scientology doesn't do that. Like, that's nuts. Yeah. Yeah, well, no, I talk about Hitler, and then You know, like you'll find that. No, look at this. You can watch this. It goes down, and then it loses focus. Like the focal plane on this, on these shots, is so shallow that several shots I think I've missed the focus on. So it's like I've ruined them basically. Does she drop? Yeah, she drops that, and that was just a test one because we can't even use that. That isn't even part of the job. This one, and that's actually not a bad shot. Fuck, man, fuck my life. She's gonna drop it again, isn't she? Drop it again. Go on. Maybe it'll be in the earlier one. She did. Yeah, she did. There we go. So, see, this one doesn't work because the logo. You can't see all of the logo in the shot. We spent all day just dropping cans into water, and like some of them are great shots. Like actually, like the way it worked, the way the can is tilted, like the way it falls and the bubbles happen is just perfect. But the logo isn't correct, so it's like you just wasted that shot. So you just spent all day just doing this, and I don't think any of these shots that I have are going to be acceptable. See this has the logo in the shot, but the angle of the can isn't really sellable either. The way it's sort of facing towards the camera with its bum towards the camera. Oh my gosh. I mean, this is just not really. This is just going to be another day of work. Wait a second. I'm going to have to. Yeah. So yeah. And this is like this drink. It's called a seltzer. I've never heard of a seltzer before. I've never even drunk it yet. I can't be asked drinking it. It doesn't look very appetizing to me. It's like it's some kind of alcoholic beverage. It just seems to be like a way of. No, actually, I can't talk about a brand. It's not good to talk about a brand like on a live stream. I've got to learn how to self-censor myself. You see, like I could have almost like lose a job or something just by talking. You know. Yeah. Yeah, there's so many cults. What Quebec had that group who were trying to clone people, correct? Quebec had that cult, and they were those people who were trying to they'd clone they were cloning dogs and all sorts, and they were trying to clone humans. Am I right? Is that the one? And they also did a mass suicide. At the top of my head, I mean, if that's the one, I think it was like they weren't just in Quebec; they were elsewhere. The aliens, yes. What did they believe? They were into some like mega weird shit. Like, um, yeah. Yep. So this is unusable. What about this? I've done 60. I've done 60. Have I done 62? I should just do them. I did 58. I should do them. Find the order. Um, so 62, 61, 60, 60. Oh fuck! I've done. These are all of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Fuck. Fucking oath. The Raelians. They were like aliens and Solar Temple. Ah. So one was Solar Temple and the other was the Raelians. Okay. It all becomes a blur, doesn't it? These sort of cults. Are there any interesting cults at the moment which are worth like? There must be some like happening in the world right now that are just like beyond. Oh, yeah, I know the one. Her name. She's on YouTube. She's a YouTube cult leader, and her name is. She's got a really Teal Swan. If you haven't heard of her, look her up. She became famous on YouTube because she would do videos about things that people don't make video like if you're suicidally depressed and you're looking up I want to kill myself, or something crazy like that on something really dark like that on YouTube. her videos would come up. She would be preying on these people. So obviously, it's pure cult stuff because you're preying on the vulnerable. And she's so you'll see her on. Just look her up. You'll see her videos on YouTube. She has all these they call themselves tealers, I think, the people who follow her. She has her own compound now in Costa Rica. And her thing is like she's reheated all that regression therapy that was discredited in the 1980s. You know, when they were implanting memories into children's heads that they'd been abused by the satanic childcare workers, that kind of thing. She was one of the people who was who had that done to her. And so there might have actually been abuse there, but she has knitted up into all this fantastical stuff. And obviously the sort of people who get attracted to her are those kinds of people who have these sorts of have a lot of issues they need to work with. And she gives them this really bad advice. So obviously there's been a few suicides that have been linked to her. But, you know, she's not doing anything illegal by existing, but she says some wild things. Like she said she was sewn up inside a human corpse when she was a kid, which is actually impossible. You can't sew someone inside a corpse. How do you even do that? And she also said she has access to some kind of spiritual library on everyone that ever existed. It's like every thought that's ever been made. And she just says all this stuff, and people are like, it just goes to show that like some things are just so fantastical that people will believe it. Like, it's rather odd. Yeah. The Away Team. Yeah, that was like Uhura's brother. Oh man, that's why there was a whole. I think that was partly why it made big news at the time, was because it had that whole Star Trek kind of aspect to it. It wasn't just sounded like something from Star Trek. It had real Star Trek clout, you know, because or a very tangential but a connection nonetheless with Star Trek. This could work. I mean, it's not going down; it's going up. Oh, I can't, for crying out loud. So with this kind of shot, because it's only got a partial background, you'll see I use my monitor as the background. I'm probably going to have to clone a lot of it around there, mask out the can. That could work. I mean, I think I've already done a yellow one though. I think I've done, what was the one I had earlier? That's yellow. I've done that one, but that still has the kind of. I might have to do some After Effects work on that one. I need the green one. I need the yellow one. This one. This is what I need to do. I need to do a green one. Oh boy. Yeah. So yeah. So Heaven's Gate, and they called themselves the Away Team. Shit me. But yeah. So now I've taught you about Teal Swan. You're going to become tealers, and you're going to be like, wow, she speaks the truth. And you'll spend all your money to go and to Costa Rica to join her on her commune. By join her, meaning like work for her and make lots of money for her. But it's really funny because she has this long line of boyfriends who will join her. Like she basically just, these guys come to the commune, and they join her because they obviously have this deep care that they see her as being someone who they, you know, she's not, you know, it's quite interesting having a cult leader who's a woman as well, I guess. But she obviously always has sex with all the men, and apparently that's the word what I've been reading online, and I don't know if there's any truth on it or not. But like, it's funny though, because you go on, if you look hard enough, you'll find that she has all of these ex-boyfriends on YouTube, on social media, telling their stories about her. And it's really sad. It's sad stuff. Like, A, she's clearly got issues, and why would you? But B, I guess, you know, you end up in a cult. Who knows? Who knows? No, I've got to use this one. Maybe it was this one here. Yeah. So true crime. So I guess cults also fall into true crime as well, don't they? Even though technically cults aren't a crime. like having a cult isn't really a crime, but they sort of fall into that rubric, don't they? It's still that kind of real life people do whack shit kind of narrative. Hippie caravan that travels to cricket test matches and worship. Oh, that sounds interesting. So you're into cricket then? It must suck being German and into cricket. Like, can't imagine anything worse. Well, for sporting. But yeah, yeah. Teal Swan. Yeah, she's an interview. Of, oh yeah, Chris Shelton. He's a former Scientologist. Yeah, yeah. He sort of he doesn't. I don't know if he has much insight if you've ever followed Scientology, but I think it's interesting because I think he's one of the people who gets a. I think Scientology now has a. I think there's with Scientology, there's a big the actual community of ex-Scientologists is larger than the community of Scientologists now, and so it's only been very recently that Scientologists have that they've managed that ex-Scientologists have organized themselves into a community, and I think he's one of the ones who's sort of done that on YouTube, isn't he? I don't think, apart from I think Leah Rimini and a few others, there aren't many people who have become sort of social network former Scientologists. But yeah, interesting. I mean, Scientology is it's just a real estate scam at this point. Surely, like people who go into Scientology can't really be doing much. Like, it's funny enough. There's a branch in Auckland. They own a really nice old building. Again, they're just buying all these lovely old buildings, and I've heard that you go in there and there's no one in there. There's just like 3 people or something who are probably just keeping the heating on or something. Stopping the rats from eating too much. And I also imagine that this big old building probably only has like the front few sections that have been refitted, and everything from the back is all dilapidated. I actually think that that's kind of what's happening with Scientology. They have this kind of, it's all been hollowed out, and all that's left is just the wealth of the leadership that's been sort of channeled through real estate, and that's the only thing they can, because they're a tax exempt organization. The only kind of investments they can make is on these they call these buildings which are ostensibly places of worship, but not really. Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Leah, because the Shelton. That's what I found difficult to watch about him. He seemed quite. He was saying interesting stuff from a sort of Scientology stuff, but then he would say comments which made him sound like quite credulous. Like I'm thinking, like some of these, I guess they present themselves. I guess one of the things which is quite attractive to learning about cults is just how the people they obviously you can become brainwashed, but some of these former cult members, they leave these cults and they seem like really cynical, critical, well-adjusted people, and you're like, well, that was like obviously it's not a quick realization. It's a slow kind of thing for when they exit a cult. This is a journey of them, but there's sort of, it's interesting seeing some of them who are actually quite, they exhibit some aspects of their personality where you go, yeah, you're probably already involved in something else now. Do you know? You're speaking ill of this one, but let's wait to see what like when you who you get involved with next. And the one I watched the documentary about Nixium, and they have that these 2 documentaries. The HBO one's the shit one. No, maybe the HBO is a good one, and well, there's one which is a good one and one's a shit one. But and I watched them both, but the shit one's the one which treats it like a reality show. It doesn't contextualize the what they believe, but the guy who was the communications director for Lexia, who gets a who who defected from it, he he came to Nexium from another cult. Like he'd full, he was like there was this I remember this documentary. It was interesting to know he was the one who directed it, and it was quite big in the early 2000s, called "What the Flip Do They Know?" And it was just for some, there was some kind of, I think, some Indian kind of New Age cult, and he drifted from that into Nexium. So now he seems like a pretty nice guy. They all seem like nice people, these cult leaders, these people who leave cults. They all seem like, you know, nice, not horrible people or anything. Like they don't. Well, I guess that's how they present themselves. When I don't know if I've met many people who, but but then you just feel a bit bad for them because you're sort of thinking, well, yeah, like yeah. I know someone who grew up in Quiverful, which is the um, uh, it's an American thing where they they have it's this Christian ideology where it's all about knocking up the the wife with as many children as possible, and that's hence why it's called Quiverful. Like that, yeah, the Duggan stuff. Yeah, it's a quiver full of arrows. The arrows are the children, and they are like basically weapons and God. Weapon, you know, it's a really very American, very evangelical kind of a thing. Well, I knew someone who grew up. She was one of these quiver arrows, and from a big family. And I think the mother. I won't talk too much about personally because I don't want to identify her, but she is interesting because she would believe some fuck. She'd be like, yeah. She'd talk really cynically about, you know, about how people believe such stupid shit, and then she would be a victim of really dumb marketing stuff, you know, and I'll be like, anyone in the world wouldn't be that credulous. Yeah, yeah. Well, this is the seduced one. Maybe that's the one that's like not that interesting because it was just the one where they just had they had the approval. They had the because they had to get all that footage. They had the people who made the documentary had to be tight with the people who were defecting. So it was not very balanced. It was very biased in the favor of the people who were the defectors who were being covered, and they have like really sort of and if you think about it, there was a lot that they could have actually, that they made these people stars of the show, where they're like their brave stance against the psychopath, who he is a psychopath, like he is this like complete, he's like the definition of psychopathy, you know, psyche, whatever you call it. But they kind of those people, they said, oh, they're keeping the money that they made, right? They all look very affluent, didn't they? They're all like they all made a lot of money recruiting people into that cult, a lot of money, and there they are in their nice LA apartment talking to the camera, and you're thinking, how much money did you make? And you know, there's a lot of questions that the documentary makers didn't ask, and then you find out that that documentary was actually made by people who were once members of Nexium. So, on one hand, that's not a problem because they have access, they understand the material. That's all good stuff. Like, it doesn't make someone unbiased, you know. It doesn't make someone biased towards Nexium, but it certainly makes you consider how the Nexium has been reflected in the film, and you understand that they still emphasize the community aspects of it and talk about all of the wonderful things and the people that they met, and that they still have this very they're still taking a sort of nostalgic view of it. And when the real hard-edged view is actually a lot probably something that people need to know, and that is that these people getting, even if you weren't getting branded by this like sex maniac, you still paid a lot of money. And even if they were like rich people anyway, they still there. I don't know. There's still something that hasn't been asked of these people, these defectors. Some of them who are making names for themselves as being, I mean, their own little cottage and just little celebrities as the Nixium defectors. Yeah, well, so that's interesting. A cult demon cassette, because so I've gotten into this. I've started restoring VHS, partly because I'm not. There's projects I've been doing, and some of the footage is what they call orphaned footage, meaning you can't find the masters for it, or you can't, and so you have to use, instead of using a master, which would be video production, professional video production, you would use it's called a Betacam SP, because you might have heard of Beta, which that was tried to be a consumer format in the 1980s. Well, in the professional video, Beta was a dominant, or Betacam was the dominant format up until almost like this last decade. It went digital, and really high quality video. But if you can't, and VHS is the delivery format. You shouldn't be archiving VHS. VHS isn't made to be archived. It's just shitty quality. But when you find out that there's a lot of masters that just go vanishing, and you find out that people just dump these masters into closets and just never, they just go vanish. You have to turn to the VHS, and then you have to start restoring VHS in a really you have to go big on restoring VHS. And YouTubers, you see some of these people, and they put VHS on YouTube, and it's like all they've done is just they've run a cord from their video player to their computer, and it's just horrible quality. And you go into these forums, and there's one, if you go to digitalfaq.com, man, these people are into like, it's like what pixel peeping is for photography. This is like I call them signal strokers, because they're really into this like making VHS work. But I was just thinking about demon, like you're saying, occult demon cassette, and how some of those could really be restored into really good quality, like upscaled, because now everyone's going into upscaling, where you kind of there's some software in the last few months that's come out, which is AI. You can upscale standard definition video into high def video using AI, and the AI will add information into it. Like for instance, if it's a person, they'll actually put hair detail into the shot, and it's not obviously there's debates on the merit to that, but it's just, some of it is quite gives a shockingly good quality, makes you're able to put it on your timeline, and it's a really good quality video. But yeah, so yeah, Nixium, Battlestar Galactica. Oh my gosh, can you imagine? But that was them. They were trying to. That was obviously from their Scientology playbook. He needed the big names, and he only got as big as Battlestar Galactica. He never got a Travolta or a Cruise. Because can you imagine if like, I don't know, like Angelina Jolie, or she's someone who I reckon would get involved with something like that, or maybe who's speculate about who you would think would be involved with Nixium, if only they knew about it. Who would get their twat branded with this guy's initials? Oh my lord. The other thing about Nixium, which makes it quite interesting, is it was invite only. You couldn't just join Nixium, you had to be approached, and that made it quite exclusive, which is also an interesting, I guess that's an innovation for a cult. Cults generally, they want to just get the people on in, but Nixium was almost quite sort of, you don't call us, we'll call you, kind of thing. And obviously that made it more interesting for the people who did join. They could probably feel like an elite member. I'm really not doing any work here, am I? I'm just talking. Holy moly. But yeah, Nixium. It's a cool name too, Nixium. It's like a really. It sounds like a startup, doesn't it? An internet startup that does some kind of ride sharing or something, some kind of ride sharing platform. I'm going to do this one just for shits and giggles because this is almost kind of where I want a shot to be. It's clean. It has the reflection. The reflection isn't so great. Like there shouldn't be this reflection here. It's quite. I don't think the focus is. I don't think I pulled focus that well. So it's not really that good a shot, but it's almost at a good angle. It's a shit shot. Oh, what am I saying? That shot is shit. All I need is one shot that I can show that can and keep someone happy for another week. If I can provide one shot that shows that I know that I can do this fucking project, then I can eat and oh well. Won't say anything bad. I guess what I will say is I will maybe tonight drink one of these and report back what it's like. I think it's like a type of cider or something. Although some of them have beer, they say they're beer based. I can't think of anything worse. No, I can't talk about it. I can't talk bad, but it'd be interesting to taste what a fruity beer would taste like. It's sort of like a fizzy. It comes across like a bit like ready to drink sort of soft drinks or something. Ready to, yeah, apple and pear, like it's a cider or something, but it's fizzier. Someone tell me what a seltzer is. Seltzer sounds German. Surely the German people here can tell me what a seltzer is. Seltzer sounds like something you take for a tummy ache, like Alka-Seltzer. That's what I'm thinking in my head. When I see seltzer, I think I don't want to need medication. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Like it's interesting, Lee. It's your messages get held for review because you. I think in this case, it's because you said kitty fiddling. So I'm gonna let people see that message. Yeah, Nixium was basically a rip-off Scientology. He was kind of just he's quite like I guess for a psychopath he wasn't, let's say, really that much of a visionary. You know, he didn't create anything that interesting. Like Nixium, when you look at it, it's really just daft shit, the same old daft shit that signed. And Scientology, it was a rip off of other shit as well, wasn't it? It's all the same old stuff, but it's like I think what his innovation was that he introduced like real BDSM into it. Like I don't think many cults had like BDSM, obviously non-consensual, or maybe no, I don't know if non-consensual is the right word because they're in a cult, they're kind of consenting. It's so difficult to talk about, right? They have to find the vocabulary, but they fizzy water plus booze, yeah. That's what it sounds like. It just sounds like I'm gonna drink all of this tonight, and I'm not even drunk. I sound like this sober, so goddamn, if you can imagine me being drunk, fuck me, God, I'm the worst. Someone says I act drunk when I'm sober and sober when I'm drunk. So that's either I don't know if that was a compliment or what, but that could probably be. Four Loco. Now that's a drink that I must try sometime. Four Loco. Everyone says so much about it. Although apparently it's not the drink it used to be. It used to be like all proper alcoholic, and now it's all just pretend alcoholic because the people got all angry about it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try the try this warp again. God damn it. Let's try to do some roto work. Pre-roto and new comp. Right. And I've crossed over to After Effects, so maybe, oh, how about that? I'm not even, Four Loco. Just the name sounds like really fun. It sounds like a new like drug from Mexico or something, like designer Mexican drug. Yeah. So what if I do that? The other thing as well is that this pre-roto, I've called it pre-roro. Why did I call it pre-roro? Pre-roto. Four Loco is it's what like it's maybe like, it sounds like the name of like a gang or something is what I think it sounds like MS-13 and Four Loco had got into a war. Who's going to win out of it? Who's going to get the territory? And it's going to be Four Loco who wins, because MS-13 is softcocks or something like that. MS-13, yeah. Oh, wrong one. Oh, for crying out loud. Window capture, and I want the window to be. You'll see my window will be. Topaz. I'm going to go into Topaz. So I'm going to show you guys some really. This is amazing. This amazing software. It's just if you're in a lot of video people are sort of sort of early adopters in this, and it's upscaling, because if you download something from YouTube, it's actually it's degraded the quality. Like, a lot of people don't appreciate the worst thing I've seen people do is they upload things to YouTube and then they delete their originals as if they think they've archived it on YouTube, and YouTube. I'm not sure what YouTube does. I think maybe they do keep the original somewhere on a server somewhere. I'm quite sure they might, but you can't get it. You don't get the original. What you get is what we see on YouTube is I don't know if crippled's not a very good word to use, because that's just not a nice word, but it's like they've hollowed out the file. They've hollowed out all of what's viewable on the video, and you get, it's not unviewable, but it's just a horrible quality video. You can't download something from YouTube and have it as being archive quality or of its original quality. And so, but if you're someone who wants to make a documentary and you've got all this like video from all these different sources, you want to have to be able to improve it. You want to be able to have to bang it into, so you can put it onto your timeline. You might have some, let's say you've got an interview and your interviewer's got your interview subject's well lit, has, unlike what I am now, and has all that really nice, you have all that really nice Netflix quality 4K cinematic interview, and then it goes into this video from the 80s or something, and it's just like fucking ugly, and you've got to be able to at least have it on the same timeline. So there's this there's all these new products that have come out very recently, and everyone, I think at the moment there's a bit of, because technology is quite new, people still haven't figured out oh god, it's because I'm just sitting here and my you couldn't see my lovely face. There I am. Well, not really, hardly. And this is called Topaz, and it's a kind of a it's an AI upscaler, and it uses these algorithms to make the video bigger, but also if you're familiar with neat video, you can do a lot already just by sharpening and smoothing out noise. You can upscale an image, but this one goes further and just adds detail, and you're like, how do you do that? What kind of witchcraft is this? This is some crazy shit. Like, this is some, and it's good for creative when you're delivering creative stuff. I'm still trying to figure out what the use case is for it, but it's really quite it's quite unnerving. So I'm just going to see what we can. So sometimes I spend. Oh yeah, here's a good example. So this is funny that I actually have it up here. So this is I'm doing this video. This is my YouTube channel has just been dormant for so long because I've been doing this video about AIDS denial, and now I'm just kind of over it really. I should just find a new subject. I should have just done one about true crime something. but you have this kind of this is this video, and you can see how poor this is. This is like several generations of video. You can see how there's pixelation. I think this is called macro blocking. When they use for the HD never going to give you up video, I think that might have been taken for the HD if it's never going to give you up. I don't know if that was doing the rounds from the people who bought out the song. It would be the they would have got it from the high quality master, standard definition masters. You can actually put into a high def timeline, and it still has so much detail you might even think it's high def, like really high quality, like high. Just the color depth is really stunning. But yeah, I can imagine a lot of people are discovering this kind of software, and they're going to town on it. Like it's good and it's bad. It's good because now we actually have people have access to this kind of stuff. This is the sort of stuff which archivists and preservation people will probably spend $5,000 a year on, for a license. But so yeah, you have this kind of just really horrible footage, and what we do is we can choose like a bunch of different algorithms depending on. They're all named after, I think, Greek gods or something. And this is very low quality, and it's going to upscale it. But then there's this the one where it's like, and it might introduce, I'm going to do 400%. You have to add grain. Another thing you've got to do when you're upscaling is you have to add noise and grain, because if you smooth things out and sharpen things look like oil paintings. Like, one thing we don't appreciate, we might not like noise but an image, but we're used to it, like it's uncanny valley stuff. Like an image needs noise to kind of give it a bit of movement, and we don't necessarily perceive it consciously. So it's good that they include that as one of the tools. But there's a preview thing, so we're going to preview what they do here, and you can compare side by side what the what it does. So you can actually see right here how they've smoothed out lines, and they've like go to her face. They haven't added anything. They kind of have actually. Wait. So that's already a very clean image. Much more. I mean, it's clearly low grade. It's very, not very detailed. Like if you were to zoom back from it, from a naked eye, maybe at this scale it won't be that great, but it's actually you can put it onto a timeline and know that it's just not going to be outright utter trash. Like it's it's been at least treated somehow, so it's not like you can see all this blocking type shit has been removed. And now has more of a smoother sort of a dimension. It's amazing how you can actually do this. I can do this manually myself with some sharpening tools, but this is amazing that it can. I think the beauty in this for me, and why I might end up buying this software, is that it does it so quickly without any input. I just choose the algorithm, but if I choose another aspect of it, another part of the, I've got to stop. If I choose another part of this video, this woman, she is hella nuts, man. she's one of the leading. This woman, her name's Celia Faber. She's all into she was a writer for Spin magazine in the 1980s and 90s. I think she was. I don't want to get into the gossip about it, but she was really into AIDS denial, and I looked up what she was doing now, and she's she's become a born-again Christian. She appears on Alex Jones' show. It's so funny watching these people from there who were big, this would have been Alex Jones territory in the 1980s. You have to binge some red letter media, best of the worst, to get my... Yeah. I do not like this high image quality. You do not like high image quality. What the fuck? Come on. What, do you want it to be all staticky? Do you want it to look like it's it was found in a rubbish dump? Do you want that? You want that? You want the rubbish dump quality? So I'm going to do this thing where it does add quality. And I think that this one, Gaia. I'm now going to have to watch the Never Gonna Give You Up. Unable to run the selected model. Look at that. Something's gone wrong. This is why it's still, the software's still in beta. I think give it 6 months, this will be ubiquitous. Everyone on YouTube will be playing with this shit, you know. So if I go, I'm not gonna put any grain in here, and I'm just gonna make it 200%. You watch a bootleg of the live action Gundam movie. A live action, oh. And you loved it. Well, part of why you like this is it's because you're watching a bootleg, right? Like when I'm when I don't know how old you guys are, but when I was a teenager, I always loved watching one thing which we don't have because of the internet is lost footage. Do you know? Like they have to when you got. So I had a friend who had the Star Wars Christmas special, and it was a copy of a copy of a copy of a God knows how many copies of a bootleg. And so obviously that it had so much generation loss. You kind of had, it was just the screen was just this nasty VHS, but we found it. We had it. We had the Star Wars Christmas special, you know? And I'm not even a big Star Wars fan. And part of what makes it quite cool is that you've got the lost footage. You've got that privileged access to this geeky shit that no one else does. This is all been blown apart. There's on the internet. You can, it'll be someone will have uploaded it to BitTorrent. There's no like, this is the secret footage of the time when blah blah blah. Like if there was a terrorist, you can watch. Interestingly enough, getting back to true crime. So this is a great thing to get back to true crime about. So Mondo videos. If you've watched Mondo stuff, which was like basically a pornography of people dying, where they would show footage. You'd see footage of people getting murdered and stuff like that. But they'd always produce it like it's a documentary. So it was a sensationalist stuff. Faces of Death was one of the most famous ones, even though the footage is fake. The guy behind behind the Girls Gone Wild video series. His name's Joe Francis. I think he's universally described as a sleaze merchant. But I mean, I don't think there's anything inherently bad about. Well, the ethics of what he's done. But he see you guys. You can see that they've added detail to her hair. This is actual stuff that the software's. Look at that. It can't process this woman. Oh well. Don't think anyone can process her. But so Joe Francis, he's behind the notorious Girls Gone Wild videos. He was a production assistant for I think some news channel, and there was lots of stuff that was being recorded by news crews from around the world going up through his desk that was too gross for TV, and he made his first millions. He saw all this footage. He licensed it and created a DVD called Banned on, or a DVD or video called Banned on Television, or Banned from Television. And the footage is really nasty shit. Like I think you see like botched executions. You see this like firing squad in Guatemala where the guys are still alive, so they finish them off point blank. That's the kind of stuff. And there's this really pleasant voiceover who's like saying stuff like, "Did you catch that? Let's rewind and watch it in slow motion. Watch as this hot air balloon burns and the people fall to the ground. If you didn't catch that, let's watch it again in slow motion." So it's clearly pornography. It's clearly, but there was something what and clearly it's traumatizing. And if you're into that kind of stuff, you kind of, you watch it because this is like when you're a teenager, man, this is like hardcore shit. It's snuff, yeah. I mean, it's snuff, but it wasn't necessarily recorded intentionally for that, right? For those purposes, for monetary. I guess if you want to call snuff if you want to define snuff, snuff would be one purely for financial gain. But essentially, it's snuff. But yeah, essentially, it's sold for that purpose. So for all intents and purposes, it's snuff. But part of what made it alluring was that the allure of it was that you were watching the stuff that you just couldn't see on TV. This was the stuff. This was the world that you couldn't see, that the mainstream media wouldn't show. This is the unsanitized world of where there's executions happening and people. In fact, there is a Mondo film. This is a genre of the Mondo. Look it up, Mondo, Mondo, which is from the Italian. In fact, there's an Italian film called Mondo Cane. That's where the words derive from. There's a British entry in the genre called Executions, and because in Britain they had to pass the censorship, it had to have some sort of journalistic merit. so they have this kind of, they're pretending it's a documentary to show you how bad executions are. So you know that executions are bad, but really it's to show executions, and the last execution they show is particularly awful, really awful. It sticks with, it stays with you. And the other thing you can know is all of these videos banned from television, executions. Those are the two really, really nice. I think also Traces of Death, which shows that guy blowing his brains out on TV, the politician. That you can watch them all on YouTube. YouTube won't ban them. YouTube will ban everything except this. And so you can watch some really crazy snuff shit, and obviously watch all the elsewhere on the internet. You can watch any old. So it doesn't have that forbidden. It doesn't have that kind of like watching nothing. Like you say, nothing beats watching that old VHS bootleg kind of stuff. Where you feel like you're really watching something. Okay, so this footage. Look how small this is. So this is from this cable TV channel. Community, 8mm. I watched that last week, in fact, on this whole trip, this whole true crime trip. It's actually a poorly written film. Apparently the guy who wrote Seven, he got famous from watching Seven, and then he basically sold the script for 8mm from the bottom of his drawer, and he refuses to watch the film. He's actually never watched the film himself because he knows that it's just an awful film, and he just doesn't want to see anything that bad with his name on it. But it's actually got some interesting ideas in it, which probably if it was better, it was better directed and had better stars and maybe had a bit more going on under the surface, it would have been much more interesting film. So what if I do this one? So this video, this is from a community access, American community access cable channel, and this guy is. His name's called Michael Illner. He always called himself Michael Illner PhD, even though it's a fake PhD. It's like, obviously, when you throw around the fact that you're a doctor all the time, you probably aren't, kind of thing. His innovation into AIDS denial was that he's quite evil, actually, because he would say that it was all in the mind. HIV was all in the mind, and he would get a lot of people who were disaffected at the time, at the early 90s, late 80s, because they, at that time, the therapies weren't therapies had horrendous side effects. So people were disaffected from having to take these treatments. They're disaffected by pharmaceutical industry, big pharma. And there's this guy who's saying, actually, HIV is a state of mind. And what you've actually been given is, like, when you go and you get diagnosed with HIV, he's well. This is true. Red M10. It's in your head, and it's actually true because stress does play a role, right? Stress is an important thing to talk about when you're talking about anything when it comes to health and how stress can exacerbate a condition. But when you're calling yourself Doctor blah 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 PhD, and you're saying the reason that you have HIV is because someone pointed their finger at you and said you're HIV positive, and the stress from that is causing all of these symptoms, you're a fucking hack. You're an actual like piece of shit because you're telling people to come off their medications, and you know. Okay, so this is where it goes bad. It's trying to introduce this detail on his face, and I've noticed that if you have low quality content, and it's trying to improve it. If you've got faces, it's like because that's the worst thing to put through it, because we know what a face looks like. The artificial intelligence doesn't know. It'll try to it probably recognizes that that's a face we're looking at. But if we look into this guy's eyes, my God, what's going on there? It's tried to put teeth in his mouth. I mean, this isn't passable. But it's done a good enough job on his jacket, I think. It's done the folds. It's tried. I mean, this footage is so weak. This footage is so poor. It's marginal. It's actually Miles Power does a good thing about Miles Power. He does a good series based on the sort of scientific claims that have been made by the AIDS denialists. But there's an interesting cultural history which is actually involves treatment activism. All these people who, because a lot of pharmaceutical companies were seen to be dragging their heels on bringing treatments to market, and so this was the rise of treatment activism. There were people who became sort of self researchers. I think the Dallas Buyers Club is a film which sort of dramatizes this. All these people who were trying to come up with their own solutions because they weren't getting any solutions anywhere, because the American government was in soft denial themselves, and there was this wall from the medical pharmaceutical industry. So you had all these people becoming activists, and a lot of AIDS denial grew out of that because of disaffection with big pharma. And then the FDA created all these mechanisms to quickly be able to bring drugs to market, and so and the big pharma lately has exploited those mechanisms to bring the opioids. The reason opioids managed to come get passed by regulators was because the pharmaceutical industry was using mechanisms that were created during the HIV epidemic. It's a really, really interesting story to be had there. Just all over, and every time you choose an approach, you find a new one, Okay, so here's a good one. Okay. Oh yeah, so funnily enough, this is a really interesting documentary that I've been I'm trying to cut up. So this is this guy. Now this is while we're going on to Mondo, while we're talking about 8mm, we're talking about snuff films, we're talking about Mondo, we're talking about true crime. This is one thing which is happening that we know, that is underground, forbidden media, is child pornography. And I've been reading about this as well. There's a whole dark web stories about there's been some really big high profile arrests, convictions, and the police don't publicize them because sometimes they're the investigative techniques the police use are quite can be open to challenge, and so it could be that the case falls apart. So so there's an interesting history about child pornography, how it came onto the internet, and how law enforcement tried, because law enforcement they're not hackers, they're not people who know anything about encryption. Your average police investigator knows, So there's this whole history from the late 90s through to now of how police have had to come to come to grips with finding and prosecuting people who have been downloading and distributing and creating child pornography. And so there's this, but there's also a history. The net police. Who are the net police? There's also this history of this cultural history of, I guess, child porn. I mean, leaving aside the grim. You know, you don't have to watch the content. You know what's on it. You don't have to watch it. But just the understanding how, as a society, people didn't know what pedophilia really was until like the 1980s. It hadn't been like a big thing in the public arena, and so there's this documentary, and it's the Cook Report, and it's 1987, and he's this journalist. If you're British, you might have heard of him, and he busts the lid open basically on child porn. This must have been something in the 1980s that you didn't. It wasn't something which people, normies like us, or even people, people who are interested in, even people who are interested in porn wouldn't have even known that this was a thing, right? But and so the police weren't on their back foot either, right? Oh, the police were on the back foot as well. And so this guy busted open, and then the British public from 1987 knew that there was this disease of child porn going on. And so it's got him going into the Netherlands sex shop, this Dutch sex shop, and confronting this guy because he'd previously done a hidden video where they'd gone and found. So what you'd have to do if you wanted to find child porn in the 1980s was you'd go to one of these sex shops that would sell it under the counter, and they would you'd have to talk to this guy, man. He comes across like a little greasy little monkey who would, there might be a footage of him later. Yeah. I love this footage because it's just so 1980s, but they go and find this guy in hidden video, and he's got him describing how he's going to hide the video in a spool and send it across to the UK. And so he goes into, and here he discusses just how easy it is to just put into your video player, and he comes up, he shows the beginning of this film. And so what's interesting is that even into the 1980s, people were watching child porn that was made in the 1960s. So it wasn't until the internet that child porn had really almost rejuvenated because of the ability of people to share it online. And see, this has done a good job of making this footage better, hasn't it? So what happened was, see, it's kind of interpreted his shirt, but not his face. It's always maybe his nose really is that crooked. I think that's done a pretty good job. Yeah, Redeem. That's right. You're going into this underground world, and that's what makes this an interesting documentary. He's revealing this underground thing. Now you could go on the dark web and you can find it like within 3 clicks. It's not, if you want to find it, you will. But now it's like, but here it's like this is this underground kind of community of and there's an the other interesting thing is watching how the mainstream porn industry sort of had to detach themselves and distance themselves from it. It wasn't just child porn, but also this, like you said, with 8mm, there was this idea that maybe porn was making snuff films as well, and even when they weren't, but there were videos that were being made from like on 8mm which were simulated gore. Like they're doing a horror film with like hardcore sex in it, and when George Bush came in to office, their Justice Department, the American Justice Department, started pursuing certain people for obscenity because they were doing these sorts of things. And I think most of the stuff is all, if you don't, anything you don't see on a free site is, I guess what you'd say, is outside the realm of acceptability within the porn industry, and including this material as well. And that's, I guess, where the underground is now. People who are interested in watching that really real messed up shit. And if you really want to go really deep, like into the outer limits of the atmosphere of this stuff, there are some sites you can go to. You have to turn your browser. You really have to, if you're using the Tor, you have to get the extension to turn the images off, because if you see what you only have to see one image to know that it's bad, and you can get the fuck out of that site. But there are some sites where they discuss it, where you have them talking about it, and you don't have, you can actually watch them. I guess this is where all those pedo hunters find their their the people they sneer, when that Chris Hansen says take a seat, they find them on these places. But they're you have that sort of talk, and the way they're talking, they're almost talking like people who are into cinema. Like it's quite well. Of course, it's perverse. They're pedophiles, but I get the impression that some of them might be there for the underground reason, that thrill of the forbidden, more than necessarily they can become radicalized into it, and I think that's interesting. That that there's people who are just they have this kind of these urges that puts them at odds with which, if they act on, they're harmful towards children. But then there's these other people who have become radicalized into it because they have come across this material, and they think it's forbidden, and there is some like real forbidden aspects of it. When you hear some of the way they talk about these videos, you think, hell, that sounds interesting, maybe I should watch that. And then you have to snap out of it, and you're like, this is fucking dark shit. Why the fuck and you understand that this is why you don't show it, and this is why it should exist on that part of the internet and not where the free sites are. Yeah. There was at least one video store in every town that run by a sleazebag. Yeah, do you think so? It was almost like maybe like drug dealing or something. But it's interesting. So in this documentary, he finds he goes to the police and says, because this is like 1987, they were using bulletin boards by that stage, so it had gone online, and he's saying to the police officer, "Did you know that these pedophiles are trading trading child pornography using bulletin boards?" And this police officer, who's pictured right here, is like, "That sounds interesting. I don't think we've seen any of that in the UK." And this reporter goes, "Well, here's 5 of them." Do you know? Here's 2 of them, or something like that. And this guy, look, you can see this look at the expression on his face, like he's basically a police officer who's been caught on dereliction of his duty. Here's a police officer who's almost like, you can see that the reason this stuff is proliferating is because they've been sleeping on the job. And he's just basically showing this guy. This guy gets put on national TV. Oh dear. That thing about when you say there was someone in every town who was run by a sleazeback that would basically get you anything. So what I've learned also in this exploration is that there are people who they're not pedophiles, but they're people who they're opportunists. I don't even think that they're like psychopaths, or they lack empathy. They're just greed overrides all of any kind of ethical constraint, and they see, like, maybe they see money. It's like almost like if you see a bag full of money in front of you, and no one's touching that bag of money. Not even the mob, even organized crime, isn't touching that bag of money. Most of us would figure out that that's kind of weird, and even if the mob and international terrorists aren't touching that bag of money, you probably should stay well away from that. But there'll always be someone who will go, well, there's money, why don't I do that? That's a really, I hope that's an analogy. That's not even an analogy. That's exactly what's happened. And so the early proliferation of child pornography was by these sorts of characters, and there was a photo processing company. You could actually see some of these big arrests by the FBI in the early 1980s. there was a company that did photo developing and also film developing, and because obviously when you're taking photographs of nasty shit, you want to find, if you're not developing it yourself, it's just like if it's color, and there probably wasn't quite the chemicals. I don't know, like color photography was a lot more of a different beast in those days. You'd have to find someone who would look the other way while they're developing your stuff. And there was this one company that was basically advertising in the back of all the porno magazines. And it was very clear who their clientele they were trying to gain were. Basically, people making amateur porn who they wouldn't give a fuck about. Obviously now you just need a mobile phone, but back in those days, all the stuff would pass under someone's desk. There would be someone who would have some sort of due diligence to know that you're up to no good. And this company was just like making millions out of being the place you'd send your film to get it. If you've got some kind of something fucked up on it. And then there was this other big case, and it was this woman. She had this really fucking weird nickname because she was African American, so she had this name like Black Caroline or some weird name like that. She went by some kind of weird pseudonym, but she had like basically 70%, like a huge majority of the, I guess if you want to call it a market for child pornography in the United States, like basically the lion's share. She was running from, she had a mansion, and it was and she had a front company. She had an address people would send their money to in Denmark, and then she'd have all of the orders forwarded to her in New Jersey, and then she would have all of them sent out from different places in the United States. She had this whole system of just delivering it, and obviously sooner or later you're going to get found out. And then the next one happened when, and this is a really interesting one because this guy was given like a 200-year sentence, and it's in Texas, and it was just as the internet was just maturing, and he was a company doing a payment gateway for credit cards. Man, look at this guy. Sorry, I've got to have a look at the detail, see if it's brought up any detail. Yeah, see, that's actually brought out his nostril detail. It almost looks like that's like where he hasn't shaved. Do you know what I mean? Like it's actually started adding to the image. That's clearly some eye detail. This has actually done quite a good job, and partly it's because the face is quite close up. Like it's not like a medium, like a wide shot. So this is something I could put into a high def or a 4K timeline, and I have no problem with that. I'm going to take the grain out and see what happens when I take the grain out. So the next one, this guy, and the thing was that what you'd do is you'd go onto his website, and it was called like Landslide Productions. It was sort of like was it called Landslide Productions? You can actually find this website on Internet Archive. It's still up there. I mean, there's still the pages from it on the Internet Archive, and he had basically, if you had an adult orientated website and you wanted a payment gateway, you'd go to this guy, and but he didn't ask any questions. So there were people selling child porn through him. He was their payment gateway, and I think that he clearly had no ethical moral scruples. That's for sure. But I also think his other problem was that he was in Texas, and and there was a prosecutor trying to make a name for themselves, and he made the wrong-headed presumption that because he had made a lot of money, that he would be protected if he got into legal strife. Because if you think about a lot of the, I'm sure people like Facebook and all of these big players, they get all sorts of weird shit uploaded to their sites, but they have the legal backup. They have the, you know, but yeah, so they have this. But he goes to jail for 200 years, and then most lately, and there's this really messed up case, which you most people haven't heard about. He actually, see, without the grain, he almost looks like an oil painting. Do you notice? He looks almost like a that doesn't look like video. That looks like an animated, like cutout footage. Don't you think? Middleman. I'm going to have to look that up then, because I'm quite interested in that. So most recently there was this guy in Australia, and he was young. He was like 20 or 21, and he was running a whole child porn empire from out of his bedroom. And he apparently wasn't a pedophile, but he was just he tried to make a free speech argument. This is why it was fun. Why it's kind of funny in a sense, dude. There's no if you're going to die on a hill and for free speech, you don't want to choose that. Like, what an idiot. Definitely on the spectrum, I think. He was definitely, there was a few things going on in that kid's life anyway, but he had this big empire, and what made him particularly awful, and this is amongst awful content, right? So, and I'm going to tell you this. We're talking about true crime here, right, you guys? So I can tell you some grim shit on live stream, and we're all adults here. We can tolerate this, but trigger warning. Graphic descriptions lie ahead. So pedophiles online, they like part of their fantasy is that the child enjoys themselves. That's their fantasy. These people who the person who watches the stuff, who has that orientation is the wrong word. I'm not going to use that because obviously there's problems with that. But someone who has this compulsion, I don't know. I don't have the vocabulary, so you're going to have to forgive me on this. For not being able to articulate very well, but those people anyway, that part of their part of the deception they have, part of the false narrative that allows them to keeps them from going more crazier than they probably are already, is this deception that there's consent involved, basically. When a lot of these people get caught abusing children, they fooled themselves into thinking that it was a perfectly reasonable relationship. That there was if you heard that guy, who's that guy, that Singapore guy who became the pedo activist. This was some of the stuff he was saying, that like Amos Yee, that guy. He was saying like how it's perfectly ordinary that some of these people grow up and they have had perfectly decent, reasonable relationships with adults when they were children, but the truth is obviously that we know the truth. The truth is that children can't consent. Children don't. There's a lot of stuff on the power dynamic. There's so many different reasons why it's not right. That you can actually other than it being a moral affront, there's also many provable, demonstrable reasons, logical reasons why it's wrong, why it's not a good thing to pursue. But anyway, so part of these they have to deceive themselves, they have to fool themselves they have to believe that what they're doing isn't damaging, and so part of that when they're watching child porn is that they want to watch porn where the child enjoys themselves. And it's a difficult thing, and this is definitely above my pay grade, but some of the child porn the child apparently does, like, it's a hard thing to discuss because it's It's because sex is pleasurable activity. Some of these people are probably really adept at grooming children. I think Oprah Winfrey said, she was talking about it with the Michael Jackson kids, the ones who were groomed by Michael Jackson. She was talking about grooming as being almost like seduction. And part of why it fucks the child up is because it confuses the child, because the child, they they because they do feel pleasure sometimes, and sometimes they initiate it and they feel confused because it's like they know it's just, it must be so much stuff going on. That's why it's wrong, right? Because of that kind of and obviously they don't report it because they feel it's their fault, because sometimes, really dark shit, when you get on that level. So part of when they're watching this child porn is that they want to see it when it's they want to buy into this fantasy. What they don't and what they don't obviously don't want to think about is, okay, so here's a kid who's trying to please the growing up in their lives and all that dark shit. But then if you're still online, yeah, I know I've lost a few of you. Okay, I'm sorry, but so there's these are what you would call your bog standard internet pedophiles, right? They just want to see naked children doing sexual shit, and and they yeah, well, there you go, anti for the rule. Well, there is this thing is that if you I think with pedophiles, it's so the cognitive dissonance is so clearly on. I've seen them being interviewed, pedophiles, and it's so clearly on display. It's quite extraordinary, because they've been on this juice, on this whatever it is, for decades, their entire lives possibly, and they've been they've encountered this criticism a million times. Kids can't consent because of this reason, this reason, this reason, and they always hit a brick wall because they can't explain. They just can't explain some very simple axioms about why, But so there's these guys, and they're your bog standard pedos, right? But then, so one thing I've learned from this true crime thing is that you might have some. Not all pedophiles are child abusers, and not all child abusers are pedophiles. Okay, so who are the ones who are child abusers who aren't pedophiles? They're ones who are legit, like pedophiles. Like I think I've having watched some of these documentaries and understanding more about the psychology of them. I feel that we need to. I don't think acceptance is the right word, but again, it's so hard finding the right language. But they need to, if they want to seek help, they need to feel like they can come to people rather than go online and meet these other people, these more radical people, and they also need to. Yeah, they should be more able to approach whatever thing that they have going on with them, because it's not good that they act on it, obviously. Now, but it's interesting. There are these people who are legit, actual. So when I'm making a distinction between these people, and these people seem sweet. These people seem. I'm trying to couch my terms, because they're not. They're very dangerous people, but they seem really sweet compared to these other people. And these people are the worst people in the world. Okay, these people are so. I've just gone into this big long tangent spiel about child pornography, and if you've been following me and you've managed to stomach it, well done. You get to this and this idea of self-deception. They want what they hope to get out of watching it. Well, what for them, maybe the child's displeasure is a byproduct of the porn that they will overlook. Like they will, if the child being uncomfortable and all that stuff, the child being in pain. But for this other group of people, the pain is the point, right? They want to see this. They want to see torture. They want to see screaming and misery. It's awful people doing awful things to children. So now that you've felt a bit educated on this particular genre, it even has a name. It's called hurtcore. Don't Google this, please. It's really, it's incredibly awful. I mean, so when you talk about child porn, it's really messed up to learn that there's genres, and this genre is the one which, when you think about pedophiles, these are the people who even they hate, right? And so this website was run by this Australian, and he pioneered it. He pioneered this. He decided his website was going to be the way that they have these hierarchies on these websites, and that they have the system where, in order to go up to join it, you to join this website, you have to upload content, basically. In order to become an elite sharer, you have to, obviously, it means you have to have access to children. You have to be actively doing it. You have to just be generating new content for them. Horrific, right? And so this is the site. It was on the dark web. And they found him, because the one thing that you won't know about the dark web is that it's finite. The internet's still a finite place, right? If you're a teenager in Melbourne who is running a dark web website, you're still going to get found, because in Australia, any given time of the day, there's probably only a few thousand people on the dark web, and you can start nailing down from who those people are, right? So there's this notorious film, and this film is called and yeah, rest assured I haven't seen it. I have to, given the fact that I've just talked about all sorts of Mondo shit. I feel I have to say that I haven't seen it. But I've read descriptions of it, and it's certainly something which no one would want to see, unless you're an actual serial murderer. It's called this video. It's called Daisy's Destruction. And it's a video of I think it's either an 18-month or a 2-year-old girl getting tortured for the camera. And so this is like real legitimate snuff. This is it was made to try to sell. It was made for yeah, so you knew I was going to get there. So you heard about the story then, Redeem 10. So this is this video, and it was like an urban legend. This video had become an urban legend, and had taken on a life of its own. Like there was some description of it as being like a lot even worse than it was, even though it was pretty awful. Pretty awful is an understatement. It's just this, this girl getting within an inch of her life, tortured, and they found the guy who did it. So this guy was doing it on this website, this Australian website, and he was another Australian. There's something going on in Australia, isn't there? And also Germany, no, but also Australia. But they caught this guy. Look up this guy. His name's called Scully, I think Peter Scully, and he, these are all people who. I mean, I feel like I'm throwing the word psychopath around a lot, but these are people who you could would have their face next to the word of psychopath in the dictionary, and he was this Australian fraudster who he was escaping his creditors, and he went to Philippines, and he was hiding out in the Philippines for years, and he would befriend these children's families, and these parents would think that they'll give, these are dirt poor people, and giving their kids, because they're hoping the kids would get a better start with him helping them and stuff, and he was doing disturbing videos, and when the police found him, there was the remains of a child buried underneath his kitchen. Peter Scully. Yeah, no, I can't. Well, you know what? Apparently, the last I read, Lee, did you Google him? Yeah. Last I read about him was that he was complaining because he's treating it like it's a resort, and I'm pretty sure he probably does have a couple. He probably does have a bit of money squirreled away. The other scandal is he managed to get the Australian government to pay $170,000 of his legal fees. The Australian government has a policy of helping out its citizens who get into legal trouble abroad, and he made full use of that. And I'm pretty sure that he's got all sorts of money siphoned everywhere. Like, he's not just a murderer. No, he's not just a child abusing murderer, stuff pornographer. He's a rich person. He's rich, and so he probably in prison in the Philippines. I'm sure being in prison wouldn't be fun for a psychopath, whatever prison's like. But I'm also suspect that he doesn't have as bad a time as we would like, let's say, and he there was also some evidence in his case that vanished. I mean, it's just a true crime, you guys. Fascinating, right? You just get drawn into it. Obviously, if we can not think about the victims too much and their misery, we can fixate on the case and the sort of the fact that he had, and he's this guy who's guilty of some fucked up shit, and he's in the Philippines, and evidence goes missing, and you're like, I think the evidence room got burnt down or something, and people have rumored. I don't know if it's just like rumors because it's just like, oh, the Philippines, third world corruption, blah blah blah. But there's all these rumors that he paid someone off to do it or something. Yeah, so he was the guy behind an actual, and one of his accomplices. He had accomplices said that there's a video of him killing this child. So just touching base on 8mm, on Mondo and all that stuff, it is quite possible that there is an actual snuff film in circulation. So if that's some food for thought for you guys. And here I was going to show you all this like wonderful work I was doing with the seltzer drink. And I hope I'm getting paid by some people who have just like tuned in and they're like, oh, let's see how our work's coming along. And it's me talking about like the inhumanities of mans and humanities men. Oh dear. So thanks for hanging in there. I feel like we need some kind of palate cleanser. There's something that we can talk about that isn't cults. Snuff pedophilia. Oh dear. Yeah, Middleman. So I have to watch Middleman because I'm quite interested in that case. He kind of got a bit. It's interesting that whole case is interesting because what happened was that when they arrested this guy and he had a payment gateway with all of these websites off it. I think the American police were a lot more better with their investigative approach than the British police, because the British police, they just took all the names from the credit card transactions and made no distinction between who was watching regular, normie porn, adult porn, people who had their credit cards stolen. You know, there was a lot of names to be vetted there, right? But the police in the Britain just stormed everyone's houses, and fair enough if you didn't have it, that if you weren't watching it, and that's fine. You'd be probably, any investigation would come in your favour. But the fact that a lot of people had their homes, what do you call it, stormed into by police. Some of these people were like family, these husbands who, the police are saying we're just we've got a search warrant under suspicion of child porn, and you're like, your whole marriage falls apart immediately, and it could be that maybe you've just watched some porn, you know, and that actually happened. There became this whole cottage industry in the UK in the early 2000s of lawyers who would defend you if your house had been if you had been investigated under this. There were thousands of people who were investigated, and there was it was almost became a cottage industry of defending them, because often the investigative techniques were a bit flawed, let's say. And I think that actually also underlines the police and how difficult it's been for them. So when all these pedophile sites on the dark web happen, one technique the police have been using is that they will, if they arrest someone who's running one of these sites, they will keep running the site themselves. And there's one site they ran for nearly a year. So basically, the police, it was also the Australian police in Brisbane, they ran a website for, it was a huge website. It was like one of the biggest of its kind, distributing all of this nasty shit. They were running it, pretending to be the owner of it for nearly a year, just collecting information and gathering information, and that they got a. And then the reason they don't obviously publicize when they do these big investigations is because you could probably see that where there's problems in that already from the start. The police distributing child porn, isn't that weird? You start like looking into it a bit further, and you're like, yeah, this isn't. Even if in principle you agree with arresting people and collecting that information, you maybe don't agree with their investigative tactics, and it becomes a bit of a the breaking of the Enigma code. Yeah, well, so if you were using Linux and Tails, which is the where you get it on the other thing about a lot of these arrests is that they are like low-hanging fruit in terms of investigations. If you've been arrested for it and you're someone who's been watching that stuff, chances are you've just like tried to download it off BitTorrent or something. These people aren't sophisticated. You see these people who get arrested, they're always these kind of like just real sad cases. And there are people who know how to who know how to do encryption. They know how to keep their everything separate, how to encrypt their stuff, and they have this, and it's a real threat that you can now have this for a lot of police and a lot of intelligence and police. That it's a real threat to them that there's now the technology where anyone can just put like a flash drive on your computer and just pull it away, and it's like you're a ghost who didn't exist. But even Tails can be hacked, and there's exploits for Tails. If you guys have heard of Tails, which is the Linux security operating service that I think Edward Snowden popularized. But one thing, and obviously the NSA don't like the fact that people can, use this and be private online. But even Tails can be there are exploits, and the FBI have ran some exploits to find some people using probably intelligence services. I think Britain as well, that they found that intelligence services can give good and obviously know more about code breaking and that kind of area of things, and but it's for a lot of Americans, it's like obviously I think it's like, is it it's the Electronic Frontier found whatever, it's the American Civil Liberties Organization for online stuff, and they have that they think that they have real problems with the fact that there's all these exploits, and they keep their investigative techniques like they'd rather lose a case than reveal the techniques they use to find them sometimes, and that's interesting. So they do have some, police do have some tricks up their sleeve. So just in case you're wanting to, just in case you felt compelled to go online and check out some toddler getting tortured, you just know that. You know, you might be on an FBI server. So yeah. CSI Cyber. I'm sure CSI Cyber do computer enhance, and they probably like enhance the picture, and you can see the cells on his skin or something. Anyway, I'm going to go because I've been online for like a few hours. I haven't got any work done, and I have to do some work. But thanks for listening to me babble about dark shit, you guys. And we could do this again another time, yeah? Ciao.